Hello everyone, I'm Dave Hart from the Warren Avenue Church of Christ in Winslow, Arizona, and I'm so glad that you have chosen to join us today. Today is Mother's Day, and I wanted to say a happy Mother's Day to all you mothers and grandmothers and even all you future mothers. And we're going to be talking some about mothers today, but we're going to be looking at our lesson today on influence. And I'd like to start out today by talking about some of my influences when I was growing up. And even though my mother was careful about what things that I had to influence me, that of course changed over time. And my early influence were things such as cartoons. Back when I was young, you didn't have cartoons, but Saturday morning I'd get up and watch those things. And then comic books were a tremendous influence on me, especially the superhero ones. Various books as I got older, Hardy Boys, of course the kids at school and what was going on with them. And as I continued to grow older, it becomes sports figures and sports heroes, different movies, TV shows. Music was a tremendous amount of influence. All kinds of things like that. But the fact was a lot of those influences were in general not good influences. Not all of them were bad, not all of them were wrong, but a lot of them were. And they definitely had a strong influence on me. As the older I got, the more other people that I hung around, the times, the culture became more and more of an influence in my life to pull me in ways that eventually were not good ways. And eventually I was swallowed up by a lot of these bad influences for quite a few years. It was influenced in the wrong way. But I also had some good influences. And I want to talk about three of them, three of my major good influences. And in the long run, not so much in the short run, but in the long run, those influences had a much bigger effect on my life than the evil ones and the wrong ones. And that's why I believe influence is so important. It's so important for us Christians to understand and to exert our Christian influence on others. So first I want to talk about my mother. Listen, my mother was a very godly woman, very faithful to the church, very faithful to the Lord. And there was three of us kids, me, my brother, and my sister. And growing up, we were all influenced the wrong way. For a time in our life, we all got away from the Lord. We all did things that we shouldn't have done. And but eventually we all came back. And one of the main reasons for that was the constant influence that my mother had on our lives. She was always praying for us. I don't know how many times I'd catch her in the late evenings on her knees praying beside her bed. And I know a lot of those prayers probably had to do with me and her being worried about where my life was going at times. And she taught the Bible. She lived the Bible. I remember as a very young child, my mom would get children Bibles and comic book type Bibles and read them to me every night. And when we would do wrong, she wasn't a bit shy about telling us. I remember her oftentimes saying, I wouldn't want to be any place that was wrong or evil if the Lord came at that time. And even though I went to evil and wrong places, my conscience always bothered me because those words always stuck in my head. And even though at the time it may not have seemed like it, at the time her influence didn't seem, at least at times in my life, all that important or all that powerful. It was her influence and the influence of the other two things I'm going to talk about that eventually won out of my life. The second influence I want to talk about is the Bible. The Bible was always in my house, and I always had several Bibles, and there'd be long periods in my life where I wouldn't read the Bible at all, wouldn't have much to do with it all, but there was other times I would try to read it every night. Listen, the Bible is the greatest influence that we could have, and I want to encourage everybody to try to read the Bible. Even if it's just a few verses. I hope you have time and put more energy and effort into it than that. But even if it's just a few verses, I remember at times in my life just reading a few verses every night. But those verses got into my head. Those words got into my head, and in the long run had a great effect in my life. The third positive influence was the church. My mom had me at church, had me at Bible class, had me at VBSs. We had Christian people over to our house. I'd sit there and listen to the sermons every Sunday, have the Bible classes. And there again, those things and the faithfulness of those in the church eventually had a stronger effect than the evil influences that I allowed to creep into my life over time. So influence is extremely, extremely important. I want to look at three aspects of influence today. One is the influence that we have. We want to be a good influence. And listen, I don't care who you are, whoever you are out there listening to this today, you have an influence on somebody. I guarantee you. You have an influence on somebody. I want us to look at watching out for bad influences in our lives. Oh, I've seen so many people, especially our younger people, who started out so good and so strong, and then they get the wrong influence. Sometimes it would come from getting a job or a new job. Sometimes it would be from, the people they're around in their sports. Getting the wrong boyfriend or girlfriend. Boy, have I seen that just totally destroy people's walk with the Lord. So we're going to talk about watching out for bad influences. And then we're going to also talk about us looking for good influences and the importance for us to be looking out and searching out good influences in our lives. So let's start out today by looking at 2 Timothy 1 verse 5. 2 Timothy 1 verse 5. When I call to remembrance the genuine faith that is in you, which dwelt first in your grandmother Lois and your mother Eunice, and I'm persuaded is in you also. So here again, mothers, grandmothers, I want to tell you something, and I don't know if you realize this or not, but you have the most important job in the whole world. No, you do. You are the one that is going to change the next generation. Just like with my mother, I'm sure at times she cried, and I'm sure at times she thought her influence was having no effect on us, and we disappointed her, we hurt her, we did ungodly things. But in the long run, that godly influence that godly influence changed us, brought us back to the Lord, kept us with the Lord. You have the most important job in the world, mothers and grandmothers. Grandmothers, maybe your children have walked away from the Lord. Maybe you become a Christian later in life and weren't able to have the effect that you would have hoped to have had on your children. But there's the grandchildren. Mothers, understand how important it is. You are going to have a greater effect on your children than anybody else. Fathers, you too, you're going to have the second greatest effect. But mothers, you're going to have the greatest effect on your children in the next generation. So we see here Timothy had now Timothy's father, it says, was a Greek, meaning that probably he wasn't a Christian, that he probably was a pagan. But Timothy's mother and grandmother were followers of God. And the grandmother taught the mother, and the mother taught the son. And what a great man Timothy was. Paul said he had no one else like him. And it all started with the grandmother who passed it on down. So we need to be concerned not only with everybody in the world, but we need to be concerned with those closest to us. We need to influence our children, our husbands, our wives, our cousins, nephews, nieces, parents, grandparents. We need to influence our family. We need to influence our friends, the people that we hang around, our co-workers that we all must spend so much time with. Sometimes that's good, sometimes that's not, isn't it? But we need to be an influence, a godly influence on all that are around us, and we need to start with the home. We need to start with the home and work out from there. Titus 2, 7-8 says, in all things showing yourself to be a pattern of good works and doctrine, showing integrity, reverence, incorruptibility, sound speech that cannot be condemned, that one who's an opponent may be ashamed, having nothing evil to say of you. So, going back to verse 7 here, in all things, we're to act like a Christian in all things. Like that saying from a few years ago, WWJD, what would Jesus do? We need to think about what would Jesus do in all things. We need to show ourselves a pattern. That means that our general life needs to be a pattern of doing what's right. Now listen, I know that none of us are perfect. None of us are going to do everything that's right. Sometimes our human weakness, sometimes we make mistakes. Sometimes we think we're doing the right thing and it turns out to be the wrong thing. But in general, we need to have that pattern of doing what's right, of good works, doing good things for Christ, teaching people about Christ, helping people, watching out for people, encouraging people, and rebuking people when they need to be rebuked. It says in doctrine, we need to in doctrine showing integrity, we need to be people who know the doctrine, the teachings of Christ, and practice them in our life and teach them to others. Reverence, we need to show honor for God when people are using God as a cuss word and being rude and crude and irreverent and saying and doing things that are not right. We need to have reverence for the Lord in all things. And corruptibility, we should be people who cannot be corrupted, not corrupted by bribes or popularity or because of even staying out of trouble. We need to be people who show incorruptibility. Verse 8, sound speech cannot be condemned. Our speech needs to be true and not to be telling dirty jokes and cussing and cursing and doing all that kind of stuff. That one who's an opponent may be ashamed, having nothing evil to say of us. So we should live such pure and holy and godly lives that if somebody is going to say something bad about us, it's going to be really hard for them to do that. I think about Daniel. Remember Daniel and how they wanted to destroy Daniel's life? They were jealous of him. And they looked at his life and they tried to figure out something they could do to destroy him. And, it's kind of like our politicians today. And boy, I tell you what, in this day and age, it's getting incredibly hard to hide things that you've done in your life. And almost any politician that you get out there, if they dig deep enough and far enough, they're going to find something, aren't they? Well, they couldn't find that in Daniel, so they had to actually make something up. They had to actually create a situation that made it look like Daniel was doing wrong, when of course he wasn't doing wrong to begin with. So we want to live our lives like Daniel, so when our enemies come at us, when those who don't like Christians or whatever, they're going to have to really work at it. They're going to have to really work at it to find anything in our life in order to have something bad to say about us. Proverbs 27:17. Proverbs 27:17. As iron sharpens iron, so a man sharpens the countenance of his friend. We need to look for good people. We need to look for good things in this life to make us sharper, to help us to increase in our faith, to search out things that are going to make us stronger Christians. And this includes other Christians. Listen, I have some Christian men that I go to and talk to, and I encourage them. They encourage me. Sometimes they challenge me. Sometimes they rebuke me. Sometimes they question me. Sometimes they make me to see things in a different light. They encourage me. These people are important in my life, and I believe also influences that we can look out there in life, that we can find good influences to sharpen us. We live in a blessed age. We really do. We have the blessing of the internet. Now, I know the internet can be a terrible curse too, but it can also be a great blessing. There's so many resources and things. We can look for good books written by good godly men. There's a lot of things that we can search out there for to be good influences, to sharpen us, to strengthen us. And we need to be sure that we do that. Listen, if you're a Christian out there on the battlefield and you're dealing with ungodliness and ungodly people and all this, it can really beat you down. And you got to be careful. You need to have those things in your life that can build you back up, that can strengthen you. So we look for resources to help us with that. And the best resource I believe we can have is a good godly friend or friends that can help sharpen us, to help make us stronger, to build us up, and to keep us going. Matthew 5 verse 16 says, "Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven." It is a dark, dark world that we live in, and it's always been a dark world, but it seems to be getting darker. And there's so many things that are difficult, and we're going through, of course, a very difficult time in this land right now. I just before I began this, I seen where another famous person died of the coronavirus. And another person I know of, a very famous person, one of the top athletes in his sport in the world, a man who had a wife and a child, a man who had a great career ahead of him, looked like a great future, 31 years old, took his own life. Took his own life. A lot of people would have dreamed to have been in this person's place, to have had the advantages in life, to have the ability in life that he had, and he took his life. It's a dark world out there. And contentment, happiness, happiness comes and goes. But true contentment, true feeding the soul what it needs, does not come from fame and fortune and wealth and power and might and sex and drugs and all these things that people desire that ultimately destroy many of them. They're walking in darkness. They're lost in darkness. In darkness you stumble and you fall. In this auditorium right here, there are times when I'll be at the other end over here, and if all the lights are turned out, which has happened a few times, maybe the main auditorium lights are turned out, I'm coming up through the other way, turning the lights out, and I'm too lazy to walk and turn the lights on and come back and turn these off. So I turn them off and I think, okay, I can make it. I've walked down this church thousands of times, this church building, and I can make it without the lights being on. It never fails. Every time I've tried to do that, I stumble, I fall, I crash into something. Sometimes, even though I'm going slow, I hit a wall quite hard. Men are stumbling in the darkness and they need the light. And the Lord says to show the world our light. Listen, Satan is not shy about being an influence in this world. And he is using people to influence, for his influence every way that he possibly can. We need to do the same thing as being an influence for God. We need to be out there influencing everybody that we can, every way that we possibly can. Letting our light shine in this dark world to draw people to the Lord Jesus Christ. We're going to switch gears now and look at bad influences. Bad influences. 1 Corinthians 15, verse 33. Do not be deceived. Evil company corrupts good habits. So first he says, don't be deceived. Listen, there's a lot of people out there that think, oh, I can hang around with the wrong people, go the wrong places, do the wrong things, and it's not going to affect me. That is a lie. That is a lie. I remember years and years ago now reading the book Biography of a Bodybuilder by Arnold Schwarzenegger. And he even understood it. We know that unfortunately Arnold doesn't appear to be a man who's a godly man by any means. But he even understood this concept. He was talking about negative people and people who would drag him down. He called them mental cripples. He said he wouldn't hang out with those people because they would affect him the wrong way. So we got to watch the company that we keep. We got to watch the people that we hang around. Just as one man can sharpen another man in the ways of God, one man can sharpen another man in the ways of Satan. We'll talk about that a little bit more. But there's other things, the other company that we keep that can also have a negative influence on us. TV and movies. Listen, I'm going to admit to you, this is one of my weaknesses. I like action movies. And there are times that I have to just walk out because they just get too ungodly. They're affecting my mind in the wrong way. We got to be careful about this. And it's hard. You know, it used to be that, they couldn't show so much skin in movies and TVs. You didn't have all these cuss words and all these things that are going on. I tried to watch something the other day, and it was a cartoon. Yeah, I still like cartoons, okay? And it was a cartoon, and there was so much cussing stuff in it. And I mean, I didn't last 2 minutes, and I had turned it off and deleted it. We got to watch books. We got to watch the books that we read. The books affect us. Listen, the Bible's a book, isn't it? And it affects us. Well, so can evil books. I remember a girl in my youth class a few years ago, and we was talking about the wrong kinds of influence on us, and we talked about books. And I talked about that book, 50 Shades of Grey. Now, I've never read it myself. I never intend to, but I understand that it's basically a porno book. And the little girl, the young girl said, "Oh, my mom's reading that book. My mom's reading that book." We got to watch the books that we read. The Bible is a book. Don't you think Satan has his books? Music. There again, I love music. I've grown up in music. Not so much the new stuff, but you know, the 60s, 70s, 80s. But listen, if you really listen to a lot of what music's saying, this includes country music, rock, all that stuff. Not all of it, but a lot of it's not saying good stuff. And that's blaring in your mind, and you're hearing that. Video games. There again, I'm not against video games. I still play video games. I love video games. I grew up with video games. Started out Pong, had Atari, went on from there. But listen, some of these video games have, you know, the cussing, the cursing, they have nudity, they have people that are running over innocent people for points, raping, I mean, all kinds of things. Don't be deceived. The company that you keep, whether it's an actual physical person or or some kind of evil influence, it's going to affect you. It's going to affect you. Going to evil places, bars, casinos, things like that. Christian has no business being in those kind of places. 2 Corinthians 6 verse 14 says, "Do not be unequally yoked together with unbelievers." Listen, that's a command from God. "For what fellowship has righteousness with lawlessness, and what communion has light with darkness?" We're not to be yoked. What does that mean? It means to be yoked together, to have a close relationship. When animals are yoked together, they have a close relationship. And what do? They both start pulling in the same direction. They both start affecting each other, and they both start pulling in the right direction. I have seen so many people, many people, especially young people, that they're on the right track. They're doing good. They're going the right way. And then they make the wrong friends, sometimes at school, sometimes on a sports team, sometimes at a job, and they get them off track. I've seen it again and again and again and again. Precious young people, raised in the church, going to youth rallies, going to Bible camps, learning to lead in the church, getting friends, getting them into dope and drugs and alcohol and filth. We're not to be yoked together. Some people may say, but how are you going to bring people to Christ unless you go out there and are with people who are not Christians? It's a fair question. We know where to go out there and bring people to Christ. But as I've told my young people through the years and years, I've worked with young people since the beginning of my working as a minister. And I love working with the young people, but one thing I've always told them was, if you are developing a relationship with somebody, I don't care who it is, and they're pulling you away from Christ, you need to get away from that relationship. If you're pulling them towards Christ, fine, develop that relationship. See where it goes. Be careful still, but see where it goes. Grow that relationship. But the moment you realize they're pulling you away from Christ, get away. And especially when it comes to romantic relationships. Listen, nobody is going to affect you more than your romantic relationships, your boy-girl relationships. And I've seen, I could tell you story after story after story. Young girl in the church, she's pure, she's doing what's right. She has a desire to be a Christian. She meets a scoundrel. Before long, she's pregnant out of wedlock. Maybe marries, maybe doesn't marry the guy. Pulls her out away from the Lord, and she's gone. Do not be unevenly yoked. Listen, don't be yoked to people. This goes for business. This goes for friendship. This goes for romantic relationships. Proverbs 6, verse 24. Proverbs 6, verse 24. To keep you from the evil woman, from the flattering lips of a seductress. This is going on the same lines of the last passage here, looking there again at that boy-girl relationship, that romantic relationship, that lustful relationship. Proverbs is written from parents to their son, but it could easily just say to keep you away from the evil man. We need to be careful. We all have a weakness when it comes to members of the opposite sex. And there again, if it's a godly person, they can have a great effect. I have known people to bring their boyfriend, somebody that they have a desire to date, a boy they like, a girl they like, to bring them to the Lord, to develop that relationship, to get married, to become a great Christian family. It's wonderful when it happens that way. But far too often it happens the other way, and the unchristian person pulls away the godly one. God is saying, use your head here when it comes to that person. They may have that flattering tongue. They may know the right words to say, the right way to dress. They may be very beautiful people on the outside, but they may be the devil on the inside. And Satan's going to use as the instrument to pull you away from God. 1 Peter 4, 3 through 5. 1 Peter 4, 3 through 5. For we have spent enough of our past lifetime in doing the will of the Gentiles, when we walked in lewdness, lust, drunkenness, revelries, drinking parties, and abominable idolatries. In regard to these, they think it strange that you do not run with them in the same flood of dispensation, speaking evil of you. They will give an account to him who is ready to judge the living and the dead. So, Peter is saying here, listen, you've spent enough time, going back to verse 3, you've spent enough time doing the will of the Gentiles. This means ungodly people. Ungodly people. We're not to run with the ungodly people anymore. It says when we walked in lewdness, when I got away from God, I was around lewd people. We did lewd things, lust. Oh man, we lived for lust back then. We lived for lust. Drunkenness. We're not to be people that are drinking alcohol. Revelries. These are wild, drinking, drug-taking parties. We're not to be involved in those. Drinking parties. These is when we go out and we're having wine or whatever at a little social gathering. We're not to have anything to do with alcohol. Most of the world loves alcohol and drugs, don't they? The Bible tells us we're not to have anything to listen. 3 different things God wants to get us through to us. We're not to be doing alcohol. We're to be different. We are not to be influenced. We're not to let people influence us to drink. I don't care what the setting is. I don't care if it's your boss that likes to have a few drinks after work, in which you can get a great raise if you hang around buddy with them. God says to stay away from the alcohol. And stay away from when they're doing alcohol. And abominable idolatries. Listen, people today aren't generally worshiping little idols, or some still do. But idolatries are anything that we put before God. We're not to be around people that think that money is the most important thing. Sex, drugs, alcohol, fame, fortune, power. We're to be hanging out with people that think that God is the most important thing in life. Verse 4 says, in regard to these things, they think it's strange that you do not run with them in the same flood of dispensation, speaking evil of you. They're going to think it's strange. They're going to try to pull you back. They don't want to lose you if you haven't been there. Listen, the world is funny. The world is funny. When I grew up and was growing up, and I didn't want anything to do with drugs or alcohol, anything like that, I always had people trying to get me to do it. Always wanted to get me to do it. Even trying to trick me into do it. They think it's strange that you don't. Even speaking evil of you. Well, look at that goody two-shoes. Or what a sissy. Or real men do this. No, real fools do this. Real men stand up and say no and do what's right. Verse 5, this is scary, folks. Who's the they? Those who are doing these things. They will give an account to him who is ready to judge the living and the dead. And it's not going to be a good account. It's not going to be a good account. So listen, folks, just to recap here as we close. Be a good influence. Think about it. Learn what it is that God wants you to do, how he wants you to act, and be a good influence. Just like for my mother on the 3 of her children, you don't know how many souls you might save. Because you see, my mother influenced that way, and then the 3 of us have gone out in our lives and tried to do our best to also influence people for the right way. Watch out for bad influences. Be on guard. Watch out for bad influences. They're everywhere. They're everywhere. Satan is powerful, and he has all kinds of influences all over the place trying to swallow you up. But do look for good influences. Look for people and things in this life that can build you up, strengthen you, pull you the right way, encourage you, and keep you on the right path. In closing, if you've not been baptized, I hope that you'll call a Church of Christ in your area. Bible says you must be baptized in order to be saved. I hope you'll call a Church of Christ in your area and talk to them about it. I hope you have a blessed week. And once again, we just want to congratulate all you mothers and grandmothers. And thank you for being who you are.